Thank you, and good evening, everybody here. And just now, I was entitled as a kind of social movement leader. But in China, we have a different culture. I never think that I'm leader. I'm just a resource person. I facilitate the social work. That's it. So, and in China, we have so many social movements and the social networks. But few people can stand out to say that I'm the leader. So that is different culture. I hope you understand. In Oriental, there's another history and another culture. And if such kind of conference host in China, I just can stay at the corner and then hear others. Here, I was allocated here to tell you something about China. I first want to say that you can have a lot of information about China's threat. Or maybe 7 months later, you can have another media talking about China collapse. So sometimes collapse, sometimes threats, may be confused. But let me tell you the truth in China, what happened. The first, and the curve shows that there are psychological economic crisis. I suppose that psychological crisis is very popular in political economics theory. Everybody understands that, maybe. But few people know that almost every Chinese leader, when they take the power, they first need to facing the challenge of the economic crisis. Deng Xiaoping took power in 1978, and then what he has to deal with, that is 40 million people with no job. At that time, the statistic didn't calculate them into the unemployment. We said that's the waiting job youth. Our generation nowadays became older, but in the beginning of the 1980s, we are the waiting job youth, means that we have no job. Not only jobless, but also homeless and securityless. That is Deng Xiaoping facing the main challenge. 40 million young people, no job. And then I should ask you, if there is 40 million young people, no job, what will happen in the United States? And that is Deng started his readjustment in the macro policy in name of economic reform. So here, that foreign media talk a lot about China marketization and China going to privatization, and that is market-oriented reform, whatever. But indeed, is that time the central governments led by Deng Xiaoping need to deal with very, very bad depression. That is the economic crisis. Caused by what? By 1970s, China took large amount of foreign investments from Western countries. You may know that China regained the diplomatic relationship with the United States and other Western countries in the year 1971 to 1972. And the American government's Nixon at that time released control. Originally, American controlled all the foreign trade and stopped China to have a foreign trade. That is like Cuba, like North Korea. That is 1970s. One American president think that they need to rebuild up the relation with China, so they released control. No barrel that time. So China started to have a foreign trade and then to take foreign investments from the beginning of the 1970s, just 10 years. Very big deficit because the foreign debts turn to the budget deficits, and then budget cannot reinvestments for the industries, and then large amount of young people have no job. That is an economic crisis caused by foreign debts. That is 1970s. Every developing countries, the first problem is not isms, not ideology, not whatever you believe, that is another thing. But the true thing is that extremely shortage of the capital investments. That is very popular in developing countries, not like developed country. You have advantage, you have a capital surplus. But in developing country, it's a capital shortage. No capital investments, no industry, and then no employment, and nothing. Okay, so that is why 1970s China absorbed large amount of foreign investment and then immediately turned to the foreign debts. And debts turned to the government's budget deficit. And then, so the problem happened. That is Deng Xiaoping need to solve the problem. That is a so-called economic reform. Okay, understand me? Yeah. And when he tried to push China going to the market reform, another problem happened. Originally, you have a so-called planning system, and then there's no inflation. When you just join this market system, immediately you are facing the challenge of high inflation. So here you can see the second one, Premier Zhao Ziyang, nowadays in name of a kind of economic reformer. He is a premier. He pushed the reform, but when he took the power as the central party leader, the key issue is high inflation. You know, CPI 18.6%. You cannot imagine, because here in the United States, your CPI, the whole country, less than 2 points, 2%. But in 1980s, late 1980s in China, 18.6. In most of these developing countries, when they just try to set up the market system, they have the same problem. So China have the problem in the late 1988, and then turn to the depression, 1989, and then turn to the social protest, and then turn to the political issue. That is a Tiananmen political movements in 1989. But they cannot solve the problem like a lot of transition countries. Even they have a political movement, people go to the street, go to the square, they cannot solve the economic crisis. Like Egypt, like Ukraine now, almost every country, no matter whatever they have as a political movements, economic is economy. Economic depression still be there. So the 1991, these are years, is depression. So when they changed the political leader, Jiang Zemin took the power in the year 1992, he first need to deal with the depression. And then 1993, when he took the power the first year, there are 3 deficits happened in China as a macroeconomic problem. 3 deficits. First is a budget deficit, very serious. So they got to deal with the budget problem, and then the second one is the bank. You may know that, I think that you don't know. In 1993, the whole of Chinese bank have no capital, 0, even minus, because the government's budget deficit took the capital from the bank, even took the savings. So that means the budget is a very serious problem, and the bank also the serious problem. But China is not American system. So the bank go to bankrupted. And then governments pay. But at that time, no. At that time, the beginning of the 1990s, we don't have commercial bank. Bank is just one hand of the government's macro adjustment. So in China, the governments, especially central governments, have 2 hands. One is budget, another is bank. So finance still be a kind of measure to deal with the economic problem. And then third one is that the foreign trade deficit. Before 1980s, China didn't have so big trade, foreign trade. Until 1990s, the foreign trade increased, and then the foreign trade deficit still be increased, followed. So by three deficits, that is also caused by Soviet Union collapse. There's a big impact to China, how they choose the way. And that time I was in the United States, and a lot of people talk to me that you cannot stand 3 years because the iron curve has been bankrupted. Now next is China. So at that time, the beginning of 1990s, China collapsed. It's a mainstream, the media talk a lot. China must be next after Soviet Union. And also because of very serious the economic depression and the three deficits is make China at that time cannot just to choose any way to go. And then by that, it's Jiang Zemin need to do something in 1990s. So 1990s, the economic problems much severe than European countries now. Also much severe than than US now. And followed by his reform, we have 45 million workers laid off. But they are also not in name of unemployment. They are in name of the out of job employment. It's a very contradiction, okay. Out of job means that you have no job, but you still can have a little bit of money for your family survive. Means that at that time, the governments gave the order to the bank. Bank belonged to the state. And then the bank gave the money, gave the fund to the factories. Factory gave the basic, not salary, the basic income to every worker. And then worker come back, can feed their family, but a very low level. 45 million. It's a very big number. It's not like waiting job youth. Means that youth, we don't have a job. We wait. But out of job employee means that you originally have job. You're working in the factory. But nowadays, every day you should go to your workshop, go to your factory, and then register as that you are here, you work. But indeed, you have no job. That is a very contradiction phenomenon in 1990s, but 45 million, big enough in the world. It's almost a lot of countries' population. But they solved the problem by not market system, by non-market system. And then they passed anyway. Even many families very suffered, but it's most of it, they have a similar problem. So they passed. That is 1990s. And then make a lot of uprising, a lot of mass people protests and so on and so. That is like 19th century's European countries' working class struggle. But we are not in name of working class. And then after that, meanwhile, a lot of rural people, marginalized population in countryside, they also have a little cash income. So a lot of rural people to be migrant laborers flow to the coastal area. Nowadays increased to, 269 million. Understand me? That is almost whole American population move. Think about China, almost 300 million people move. How much bus and trains you need, and how much pavement road you need to build up. So anyway, that happened in the 1990s. But few of foreign media gave a report. So nowadays you only talk about communist China, socialist China, communist party, whatever isms, whatever you talked here, it's just whatever you talked. But it's not the truth. The truth is large number of workers lay off. Large number of peasants' labor move out. That is almost the biggest social people's movements in mainland China. But you just have no such kind of information. So I think that I tell you the truth, and then you may have your own thought. You think of what is China. And then that is extremely difficult. And then past. How China passed is because of another very important economic crisis happened. That is not inside China happened, it's outside. That is East Asian countries' financial turmoil happened in 1997. Look there. It's 1997. East Asian financial turmoil happened and attacked Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, even South Korea. A lot of countries' financial system collapsed. And then the whole Asian area reduced demand. So the foreign demand, overseas market demand in China also decreased. So when China just half the economically recovered, and then they immediately facing the new challenge that is foreign demand decreased. And then immediately that the whole of the Chinese industry is facing the challenge as American, as European in 1929 to 1933. You know that. 29 to 33, what happened in Western countries? Overproduction. So when China just set up the industrial system, immediately facing the challenge of overproduction because overseas demand decreased very sharply. That is 1998. And then facing such kind of challenge, what you do, what you did in 1930s. I think that all the professors know, students need to go back to check your textbook. You have a Roosevelt, yes? Roosevelt policy is what? Stop market. Use government's hands to push the surplus industrial capital into the inland infrastructure construction. Sure. And then American, just a closed door. Don't make trade with Europe because Europe much troubled than United States. You have a big continental, you can use your surplus industrial capacity for infrastructure construction, so you survived. But European countries, no, falling into the war. So America until 1941, you join the Pacific War. Before that, no, you try to protect yourself. That is the history. I don't want to talk too much. I just summarize. And then now China facing the similar problem in the year 1998. Can China keep going on market system? At that time, I was one of the policy researcher in the central policy think tank. What we suggest to the central governments is that the only one policy we can learn is Roosevelt policy. Understand me? That means American in 1930s is the model we learn. That is late 1990s. Just 70 years past. So from that time, China start to invest by the governments. Governments treasury bonds issued. Here, when you have the problem, you issue the American treasury bonds for financial capital. In China, in late 1990s, they also use the bonds for the investments for what? Physical production. So that's a different way. In China, it's a physical production to absorb the surplus capacity of the industry. So from that time, from the late 1990s to now, we have a 15 years large amount of investments led by so-called governments. The governments need to play a very important function and then to move this big industrial capacity into the infrastructure construction. That's from the late 1990s, China have 3 major state strategy. The first, we said 3 rebalance. Because 1980s, 1990s, 20 years, China have a 3 gap. Coastal inland became big gap. No. And rural urban became big gap. I mean, then poor and rich. So we have a 3 gap. And from late 1990s, these 3 gap need to have a rebalance. So the first one is a regional gap. So China started to invest into Western China, Northeast China, and Middle China. So the total amount is 8 trillion Chinese yuan. It's almost 1.2 trillion American dollars. Exactly for the infrastructure construction. So the highway, the fast train, the airport, and the irrigation system, whatever, built up in Western China, Northeast, and Middle China, and then to make the balance of the regional gap. Yeah, they succeeded. Just 5 or 8 years ago. Nowadays, the Western China, inland China, GDP grows higher than the coastal area. And after that, China started to invest into the rural-urban gap. Large amount of investments flow into the countryside for 5 communication: pavement road, electricity, pipe water, telephone, and internet. So these are 5 built up into the village. Nowadays, 99% of rural households have electricity. Much, much better than other developing countries. But remember, cannot take back. You built up the road to the countryside. Can you ask these scattered farmers' households to pay back these investments? No way. Who invest? State Bank. Who carry out such kind of big project? SOE, state-owned enterprises. So that is why we said it's a Roosevelt policy. It's not others. Okay, so by these investments, China also set up the social umbrella for the rural people. So from 2005 until now, also 8 years, China invested into countryside 8 trillion Chinese yuan. It's $1.2 trillion. And so by these 2 big projects, we have a 2 balance. Regional gap, rebalance. Urban-rural gap, rebalance. Now, China should target the poor and rich. Poor-rich gap now in China enlarged. Similar as the United States. You have 1% of population occupied 40% of the properties. China is 5%, occupied 44%. So similar. So the gap between rich and the poor enlarged. Now how to reduce such kind of gap? That is the new challenge. So here we can see that the so-called smiling curve. Now China, the outside of China, we got to facing the challenge of the new era of the financial capital. The financial capital era means that you are here, you are United States citizens. You know that your government did. They have a QE and super QE. QE1, QE2, QE3, QE4. And then QE means that you only pay 5 cents as a cost. And then you print 100 bill. The bill, very low cost, but very high, very high returns. And then means that you transfer the cost to other countries, not you, your government. And then, like China, China is at the bottom. So if China cannot build up the infrastructure for the environment, for the resources, means that China cannot change the position, always be at the bottom. So that is why now China very much emphasize the ecological civilization. And then invest, now they turn the investment directions going to invest into the reconstruction of the environment to maintain the resources. That is a big change, but they need time. As I mentioned that the regional gap, they paid 8 years. The rural-urban gap, another 8 years. So the environment rebalance, we need maybe 10, maybe 20 years. So now started. So, and look at this one. The environment problem in China is very serious now. It's because of the high GDP growth. Look at the curve. The whole world, after the Second World War, most of the developing countries, they are trying to learn the developed country. What is developed country? Industrialization. So developing country want to set up industries for the national industrialization, and then to make a lot of resources consumed by the industries, and then to make the pollution more and more serious. Not only the industry, but also agriculture. When agriculture trying to modernize, they use more chemicals. Not only the poisons, but also the fertilizers. They use a lot of chemicals, and then to make the agricultural area pollution become much, much severe than the industry, than the urban. So now China have a much agricultural pollution. Then here is the picture shows that the environment destroyed. And then also the drought is very serious. And the mega cities become very heavy smog. Here is the mega cities. You can see that mega cities, most of these worldwide mega cities, not good for human beings' livelihoods. So the same. So we are trying to, here also the pictures shows that 1/3 of Chinese territory now covered by the pollution. So most of these cities in China now is a very serious pollution. So when you give me invitation, I think that, okay, fortunately I can avoid the Beijing pollution. So here is really good. You have a very good environment. Now let me turn to my network. We have started our environmental protection, organic production, and the social network, whatever, social construction. That is, I said, it's a social innovation. It's 13 years ago, since the year 2001. That is the local villagers mobilized by our volunteers to set up the co-op. That is our young volunteers from university. You have a university students society. We set up more than 200 students society, send them to countryside to help the marginalized rural people organize. And then we set self-organization, self-empowerment, and self-development. And these are the people built up their own co-op meeting hall for the development of their cooperatives. And here that we are trying to set up the eco house. Ecological architecture means recycled architecture materials, no cemento. So we don't want to have a more cemento materials pollution. So here that is we are trying to bridge the citizens and the rural people and for the integration. And we initiate several different programs to help the citizens to participate the organic production in the suburban area. So not only we set up the organizations in the countryside, we also try to have the consumers campaigning in the urban area and then bridge them together and then to have a kind of integration. So nowadays, the central governments more emphasize the townization. Even they said, okay, urbanization is a trend, but in China, we should separate the risk into the small towns under the county level. So it means that they don't need to concentrate all the capital in these mega cities and then to have big pollution. Because, China have more than 3,000 county central town and then 34,000 construction town. So if we can have a kind of townization investments, okay, good. We may separate, not concentrate the pollution and the economic risk into the cities. So that is why we have so many local programs. Here is a CSA. And 10 years ago, I'm here to learn CSA in the United States. And also we are trying to learn something as a transition town in European countries. And then when we came back, we are trying to move these models in China So we mobilize citizens to join our CSA farm, that is a community support agriculture. And then by that, we are trying to regenerate the organic production. That is a lot of cases. They join the farm and then to meet the animal and then to practice what is the organic farming. And also there's young trainees. The people, they organize the team, come to CSA farm to learn how to regenerate the traditional agriculture. Here is our publications. And we are trying to have a kind of harmonious society by people participatory agricultural actions. And now we organize many local programs and then also trying to give the suggestions to the policymakers. The new one is that love your hometown. We are trying to organize these musicians, poets, and novel writers. We are trying to organize these intellectuals going to their home country, to their home village, and make them to have a memory. Don't forget where you come from. So that is a kind of cultural regeneration, means agriculture regeneration. So by such kind of social actions, maybe we can have a future. But if we just go to industrialization, urbanization, modernization, whatever, decisions, that will be a big disaster. I hope that we can continue our efforts and then to have a more good future. Thank you.